you. Okay, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I'd like to pay my respects for the elders, past, present and emerging. We must always remember that under the concrete, and as the daughter of a civil engineer, I can do better than that. Under the asphalt, stone aggregate base of different sizes and thicknesses depending on the road, the stormwater pipes and the sub-base, this was and always will be traditional Aboriginal land. We have 4 themes today and 4 speakers: family, work, sports and John's wrap-up, if there is anything left. For those of you at John's 50th, I am graciously sharing the floor, and you will be disappointed there aren't many jokes about John. You'll be disappointed also to know that the 1995 Jesmond High School captain will not be speaking today. Oh, little sister, the power of the floor. Write that down, that's like a Shakespearean quote. I believe she's working on a speech for Pa's 90th. A little housekeeping before we begin. If you get up during the speeches or heckle, Cherie, you're sitting next to a responsible adult. And where is your mother? All bad behaviour will be punished by helping Hal stack chairs at the end of lunch.
Yay!
Let's begin. I'm Hal Newton and this is Dad's Life. Harold Edward was born in 1942. For those who couldn't subtract 80 from 2022. He was born in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. He was the only child of John Thorpe and Fanny Amelia. I wanted to call my daughter after my granny. It wasn't popular. He attended Queen Mary Primary School and Prince Albert, weren't the Canadians royalists, Prince Albert Collegiate Institute. In his last year of school, Harold was a member of the 1st North Saskatchewan Rifles, a version of cadets, and obviously where Nick got that gene from. Interestingly, you would have thought that Harold would like shooting. John can elaborate later. It's not a stitch-up, John. Travelling forward a few years, Harold went to see the world, so he secured a job on a German freighter in 1966. He got free passage in return for living below deck, below the waterline, scraping rust and pumping bilge. This could be the reason he has an iron stomach and never, ever gets seasick. Even in the huge swell off Alaska when the entire crew went down, Hal didn't get sick. The trip from Canada to New Zealand perhaps also cured any love he may have had for boats. Because although he bought us a speedboat when we were growing up, he barely got in it. John and I would take it out after school with one of his girlfriends. John's girlfriends, not Harold's girlfriends. Well, I better be careful, John's going after me. The German freighter took Hal to New Zealand where he backpacked and hitchhiked, eating only apples and chocolates. And you guessed it, he was picked up in a car by 2 young Australian girls, one of whom was Lois. Harold returned to Canada only to be stalked by Lois, who was allegedly travelling across Canada to Europe. Lois made it to New Brunswick where Harold was working in the pulp mill. Harold owned a dark green 2-door hardtop Impala. I don't think there's a grandchild that hasn't heard about the Impala. Harold and Lois were engaged a month and came to Australia to be married in 1969. Whose birthday was that, Cherie? Oh, he was born in 69. Australia is where Harold became known as Hal. John Thorpe was born in 1971. Many, many, many years later, along came me. And then there's two more.
That's how it works.
Two more. Gregory James and Jennifer Louise. Dad named John and I, and the other two, someone else. Mum and Dad have 9 grandchildren: Nicholas, Scarlett, Georgina, Joseph, Archer, James, Ashrin and Edwina. So nearly everybody here under the age of 20. Dad and Mum have travelled extensively to Europe, Singapore, USA, China, Canada, and that little place at the bottom of Canada. USA. They've also been to South Africa, where there's some great stories about lions rounding up Impala in the middle of the night near their campsite, and an infamous bike hike where they thought they were following friends' footsteps, only to realise they rode in a totally different direction to communities where they'd barely seen white skin. Dad has tried to scare Mum on many occasions. We saw him collapse on TV during a fun run in '82. We were all watching at the Gabbets. Where are the Gabbets? They're here today. And he also realised at about 3,000 metres he suffers severely from altitude sickness when he slipped into a coma and had to be treated in a hyperbaric chamber in Peru.
Yay!
I think Mum is still trying to translate the Spanish medical documents. And there is the time that Dad left Mum in the middle of the night in the Nullarbor when the car broke down. He walked off to hitchhike to the next town. He didn't return until the next day. They are still married. I have a lot more to say, which I know you think's unusual. But before this becomes a John's 50th speech take 2, I will reluctantly hand over the mic to Nicholas.
Good afternoon. I'm Nicholas, the first and most important, best looking and most intelligent grandchild.
Yay!
Carl is a civil engineer, John is a mechanical engineer, and I'm studying electrical engineering. The world is engineered by Newtons.
Nice.
Pa graduated in 1978 when Greg was a baby. Prior to that, he was a surveyor on the large sweeping roads in Canberra. When driving on the roads in Canberra, think of Hal. The camber of the roads is perfect. Camber, for those without a civil engineering grandfather, is the design and construction of roads to assist in the drainage of water. Rainwater does not gather in puddles on the roads in Canberra.
Yay!
Newcastle roads could have done with a surveyor like Hal, especially the supercar circuit. Don't you agree, Alan Howard? He became a civil engineer, worked at Alcan, and took up teaching engineering at TAFE. He also taught first-year architecture at the University of Newcastle and worked for Open Training and Education Network, OTAN, with students studying by distance. He didn't retire until he turned 73. Let that sink in. Pa didn't retire until he turned 73 years of age. He taught for 33 years at TAFE. Students would ring him at home before mobiles and run into him in the street. He didn't go many places without seeing a student. The one thing Pa did for longer than teach at TAFE was deliver Meals on Wheels. There aren't a lot of TAFE classes on Friday, so we started delivering Meals on Wheels in 1986. Come on, how long was Pa at Meals on Wheels? 36 years. 36 years. For long service at Meals on Wheels, they gave him a watch. Quite a few years ago, no one remembers what year. Last year, they even gave him a trophy saying 15 years. He should have gotten 2 of those. The reason he got a 15-year trophy, though, is because Pa started delivering Meals on Wheels before they kept accurate records. Pa was one of the youngest people to start delivering in 1986, and now he's one of the oldest. At one stage, he even had to supervise a young offender who had to do Meals on Wheels for community service. When I went to preschool in 2007, Pa would take me to Meals on Wheels with him every Friday morning. The old people love the very gorgeous 4-year-old coming to see them. I remember distinctly Pa putting the big box of meals in the back of his old gold Pajero. One time, a lady had given me a chocolate, and Pa said I couldn't eat it until we got to the 3rd roundabout on the way home. I knew there were only 2 roundabouts in the Link Road, and I was worried. We didn't go directly home, but went home via another roundabout. Out of the way, increasing the distance, but I got my chocolate. Pa is famous for his shortcuts. Pa and I always managed to bring home a spare meal. Pa would sit down with me at the dining room table, he'd fold up an A4 piece of paper on which he wrote construction site and stood it up around my plate. Pa drew analogies between the food and road materials. For example, the peas were rocks, carrots were boulders, mashed potato was asphalt, and the spoon was the excavator. It was very entertaining. I always ate my meal. I'll now hand over to Georgina. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Georgina. One of my favourite memories of Pa was when I brought home my assessment notification to build a bridge in Year 8 science. You had to build a bridge and you had to do it all by yourself. Pa didn't need me and got straight to work. I got a very good mark. Let's talk about sport. Pa's always loved being active. He ran every day at lunchtime at our Ken. He even ran with the hashtag Harriers. Seriously, that was the name. Then they ran and then went to dinner. Pa rode to Ties Hill Tave from Wall's End all hours of the day, and at night on an old bike with a big leather seat. He played tennis for years of a Friday night with Don Nelson, who I believe is here today. Pa also played soccer for many years. Pa also loves orienteering, and he took the family every Sunday with the Gavetts, who are also here, Mr. and Mrs. Gavitt. Pa has taken all of his grandchildren orienteering at some stage. As you may know, Pa is currently an avid golfer. There are quite a few of golf friends here today. Pa loves watching sport, and over the years has watched 2 generations of family play soccer, ballet, karate and basketball, as well as some generations of nippers, netball, hockey, softball, ballroom dancing, cheerleading and tap dancing. All 9 of his grandchildren have played or still played. Yeah. Now I'll hand over to the ultimate bandage bear, Mum made me say it, John.
It's hard to follow such great speakers, but I've got this made by Catherine. Afternoon, my name is Catherine and I'm the favourite. So no, I'm John Thorpe Newton III. Yes, I'm the 3rd. And there's a whole story around, there's John Thorpe, James, John Thorpe. And John Thorpe, my grandfather got to having Dad, and they called him Harold Edward. So Dad's taken it back up, and we've followed that tradition. There's James, my son. He got a middle name though. James never got one previously. So Pa loves to mow lawn. It must be the 6 months where of the year in Canada where there's snow on the ground. So rather than shoveling snow, he gets to mow the lawns, and he's mowed 3 scout halls, 3 guide halls, the Wall's End Uniting Church, and Catherine's Place. There isn't much lawn at Speaking of golf, you guys would appreciate this. There's a time when I went out with him occasionally. I had Fridays off from work or not being at TAFE or uni, and I would go out with him and try to caddy for him. And he'd have this bag full of gear. And I was looking, going, well, there's clubs in there, but there's also a golf ball picker-upper and a suction, like one of those crotchy yabby pumps. I'm like, what's this for? He goes, I like to collect the golf balls out of the ponds. Anyway, one time there, he got a cousin of Mum's to go with us playing golf, and he didn't want to go in, so he had a telescopic one that he could reach out for. And he couldn't quite get it. And Rodney Jones goes, I can reach that. Well, he went to reach in and fell over backwards and drowned himself, so he was all covered in water. So that was the end of his golfing day. So Dad's got a whole lot of equipment for retrieving balls because he likes to hoard. Another thing to go with the running, he collected Pablo running shirts and a running course at Wall's End up into the Nanigo Hill. And he took great delight in going back and telling them that they'd put the wrong year on one of the shirts, because he'd collected and kept in the plastic bags all these golf shirts running shirts for the last 10 years. So he took them back and showed them where they'd gone wrong with the year on the shirt. Speaking of going shooting with to do with the North Saskatchewan Rifles, we didn't take a rifle with us, but we went shooting with Uncle Alan. Where are you? Yeah, good.
Hey.
And it'd be Greg and I and Dad go out. We'd go shooting up Mudgee or up towards Willow Tree, and we didn't want to scare them, so we sent our scout in. So Pa would go in to scare out the roos or whatever animals in there, so we could have a shot at it. I guess he thought if we weren't very accurate at killing anything, then we wouldn't be able to hit him. So anyway. Cars. Dad had a 1970 HT Holden station wagon. That was his second car after coming to Australia. And I thought I'd try to do it up. So I took it off him when it was getting long in the tooth and he'd upgraded to his Pajero. And I took it to a friend's place and parked it up. Well, Dad will probably tell you the detail on it, but 97, the Newcastle Knights won the football. And somebody came past in a bus and needed a lift home, so they took the car. That still reminds me to this day that this old HT Kingswood was missing, and it's my fault. So then we get to the gold Pajero, and I bought that off him. I probably just took it. But anyway, and I was driving it to and from the airport when I was flying in and out to go to Queensland, and it broke down on the side of the road, and I left it there. Went to work and teed up to pick it up on my way home, and it was gone. So it reminds me of that one too. So I don't get to drive the Prado much these days. Where are we up to? Oh yeah, with fuel and cars, we used to go. The 5 of us, 6 of us used to hop in the car and we'd drive somewhere. And because the fuel gauge didn't work and we weren't very mechanically minded, it would put down in a book what mileage it was, what kilometres we'd done, and how many litres we'd filled up. And we'd calculate, we'd all have to do it, that's why we're so good at maths probably, we'd have to calculate how far we'd gone and how many more kilometres we had till we ran out of fuel. Generally we're doing that halfway to Lisarow, and we'd run out. We got the calculator. So, you get in the back, and we couldn't tell whether or not it was the fish oil from him killing the rust in the car, or the jerry can. But he'd get his jerry can out, put on his greatest, his famous Shimano's, and jog off down the road. And we'd sit in the car asking Mum, did Dad get hit by something today? Did he make it back? Anyway, he used to come back all the time with his little 5-litre can of fuel, fill it up, and we'd go to the next service station, fill up, and then he'd have to adjust the calculations in his book. Obviously, someone else had driven the car and messed up his mileage. Where else have we got? Sneakers one. So yes, Dad's very famous for shortcuts. We still have them to this day. They usually are longer. They take a lot longer getting there. But it keeps telling us it's the journey. It's not the destination, it's the journey. What else have I got here? I put some extra ones down, I can't read them. Dad's the inventor of dad jokes. If we said number 23, or you said number 23, we'd all laugh loudly knowing which one that was because we've been through them so much. A couple of quotes he has is, well, one of them in particular, we'd have friends come around and I'd be making up a story about something in the house or something I'd done, and he'd turn to me and he'd say, John, you're making a snow job of this. Usually meaning covering stuff up or making things bigger than what they were. So Dad's a pillar of the community and a great family man. He's very supportive of us all, so I'd like you to charge your glasses, ladies and jelly spoons, and say with me, Hallelujah, Hal is 50. He's 80. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.